Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Unconventional Attorney Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Small, and I am the Unconventional Attorney. Hopefully, you guys are having a great day, a great week, a great month, a great everything. I am actually having the best day ever. I just got off a call with one of the sanctuary members. He's actually also a syndicate member, part of my group, basically. And this guy, his name is Don, has been working hard at his business for probably the last, I want to say 4 months, 3 months, 4 months or so. He's been creating content. He's been doing it consistently. He's been sticking to the program. He's been trusting the process. And for a long time, he wasn't seeing a tremendous amount of results. And we talked today, and he told me that he just signed up like 2 or 3 new clients. He has 2 or 3 more potential client meetings scheduled just in this last week, like in this last few days. And he's just so excited that everything's coming together, and I'm so excited for him. I wanted to give him a shout out here, in perpetuity for life, for his consistent effort and consistent pushing himself and doing it when there was a lot of self-doubt and there's a lot of stuff going on. And I want to invite all of you who may be struggling the same way. If your business is not where you want to be and you're not sure why and it's not working, please come and join us in the sanctuary. I can help. I've been doing this now for like 10 years, and I've got a lot of ideas for you. I have a proven system. It's worked in estate planning. It's worked in family law. It's worked in criminal defense. It's worked in business. It's worked in traffic tickets. It's worked basically in every type of legal practice that you can think of. It has worked, and it will work. And if you're not a part of the group, then you're just missing out, okay? If you think you might be interested, go to theunconventionalattorney.com/sanctuary, and you can check it out, okay? There's no commitment. There's no contracts. You can try it for 30 days. If you don't like it, I'll give you your money back, but you're going to like it. We have live chats every week, live trainings every week, and where we break down all sorts of different stuff on a very specific and systematized level. And there is enough simple, executable ideas inside to help you really grow your business, and most importantly, help you create the life that you want to live. All right? That's theunconventionalattorney.com/sanctuary. Go check it out. Okay? All right, that's it. That's it for the ad, right? For the push, because I want to take this time to introduce a guest for today's podcast. His name is Ryan Munsey. He is the author of the book "Fuck Your Feelings: Master Your Mind, Accomplish Any Goal, and Become a More Significant Human." And we just talked this morning. Actually, I'm recording this after our talk, so I know it was a good one. We cover a lot of great stuff, and it's a little bit of a different conversation than I normally have, because there's a lot of science involved in the way that Ryan approaches this problem, or this situation of mindset and awareness and performance. Most importantly, and it was a great conversation. I learned a lot, and I'm sure you will too. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Hey everybody, I'm excited to have Ryan Munsey on the show. He is the author of "Fuck Your Feelings: Master Your Mind, Accomplish Any Goal, and Become a More Significant Human." Oh, that's right. He's already. If you're watching the video, you can see him. He's already on the screen. So he has already magically appeared. Good morning, Ryan. How you doing?
Good morning, Chris. I'm doing well, thanks. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I want to apologize in advance. This is our second attempt at this conversation. I ditched you the first time on accident, completely on accident, but I did. So I really appreciate you coming back, and I'm excited to talk to you about your book and about everything that went into it and is around it, because this is something that everybody deals with, and particularly the people that listen to this show. I think the idea of, sort of getting over your feelings and emotions in some ways, and utilizing facts to sort of do things that you need to do, right? I mean, is that tell me, why don't you tell me what this book is about generally? And then, by the way, we're going to dive way back and we're going to talk about your life, because I like to know people's backstory.
Yeah. And I mean, just to, I guess, use a basketball analogy, since you've got the KU ball behind you. I think maybe it was Jerry West that said this, but there's this, the saying is, if we only did the work, or if we only do the practice, if we only do the things when we feel like doing it, nothing would ever get done. And that's really the underlying theme behind the book. It's to not let our mood or our feelings or our states dictate how we show up and how we move through the world. When I do the workshops and when I work with people on a one-on-one coaching basis, what we're really trying to get at is being state independent. And what I mean when I say that is that you can show up and be the version of you that you want to be, regardless of external or internal circumstances. As a father, you can probably relate to that, I love working with people who have kids, because it's like, that's the easiest thing to tap into. And as a coach, you're always looking for a way to kind of get your hooks in. And I know that if I start talking about, how are you showing up as a father? What kind of father are you being for your kids? What kind of example are you setting? That immediately, I can help you tap into, maybe that extra gear, or even just the gear that you want to be at, but your feelings are kind of preventing you from being there on a given day. So, that's really what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I love it, because it's something that you deal with every day. And when it comes to, so the other thing too is, I create a lot of content, and I try to get people to create a lot of content. And so even when it comes to feelings, you kind of have, I feel like you have two sort of feelings that you deal with and have to work through. Feeling number one is like, oh, I'm tired, right? Like, I don't feel like doing this today or whatever. Like, I'm kind of melancholy or whatever. Like, I'm grumpy. And then there's also the like, oh, I got to record this video and I haven't done it a lot, so I'm scared, and like, so it's like these two different things that are sort of pounding you from both sides often, which is just the fact that you're lazy, right, on one end, and the fact that you're scared on the other end. Because everybody, I talk to people, and it's like, I do some one-on-one coaching too, and I'll talk to people and I'll say, well, like, how you been doing on these things that we talked about and we agreed were important, right? Like, how are you doing on these things? And they're like, oh, I got busy, and I'm like, excuse, right? And being able to overcome that and get through that, right, is everything. Like, if you can master that one skill, the sky's the limit, right?
Absolutely. So there's a couple of things that pop up to me in the hypotheticals and even the real experiences that you're talking about there. And some of that is awareness, and we'll get into that as we talk about some of the underlying what I call the human operating system. And then there's also some time management components to that. If something is the prime mover for your business, if it is that important, then make sure that that's the thing that's being scheduled and that's the thing that's being done. And so that kind of falls under what I teach when we get into goals and action items, and time management is something that I call move the chains. And if that's the most important thing for your day, then do that first.
Wait, though. Hold on. You don't call it move the chains, right?
No, I do.
Well, no, there's an extra word in there, isn't there?
Yeah, but I didn't know if we could say that.
If you're going to have fuck in the title of your book, I'm going to make you at least say that word one time. Okay.
All right. Move the motherfucking chains.
That's it. There it is. All right, good. All right. So I'm just kidding. I didn't mean to. I'm a perpetual cutter offer though too, by the way. So I want to apologize in advance because I can't help myself.
No worries.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Keep going.
No, but so go back to what you said about like the either we feel lazy or we feel melancholy. We're afraid. I'm somebody that works from home. Looks like you do as well. And I think that for anybody who works at home or has their own business, and when we're outside the pale of the normal 9 to 5, you don't have a boss, you don't have to show up at a certain place at a certain time. There are a lot of advantages to that. There's such beauty, and I think that's one of the things that calls people like us to pursue these things. But let's be honest, there are some negatives and some downsides to that, and you just touched on one of the major ones, that when you're at home or when there's nobody looking over your shoulder, um, especially when your business gets to a place where you're out of survival mode, right? Like when you first start a business and you're in survival mode, and if you don't do the work, if you don't get the clients, if you don't bring in the revenue, you don't eat, or your kids don't get clothes or whatever. Like, I think it's pretty easy to stay motivated there. For me, and for a lot of the people that I see and work with, the real trouble lies when you get beyond survival mode and you start to get into that sustainability mode, or even just kind of growth, that kind of second phase of business, where if you don't do the things that got you to where you are, if you don't do the things that got you the success with the same sense of urgency, it's kind of like in basketball or football. You always hear programs talk about it's harder to stay at the top, because that complacency can set in. And so, when we work at home, we don't have somebody breathing down our neck, or we don't have to, punch a clock or show a boss what we've done. It's very easy to kind of say, oh, I don't feel like making those videos today. They don't have to be done today. It's not the end of the world if I don't do them. So I'm not going to do them, or I'm not going to make those phone calls. And then before you know it, if we actually let that happen on an ongoing basis, we stop doing the things that led us to success. And so, when we talk about goals, I always talk about what are the actions that deliver the results. If it's a fitness related example, if somebody's focused on the outcomes and then they say, oh, well, I lost this weight, or I benched this amount, or whatever, but then you stop doing the things that got you there, then that's where you see the backslide, right? And it's the same thing in business, and the same thing in life and relationships. So it becomes very important to be able to control the space between our ears, so that we continue to show up and do the things that we're supposed to do the way that we're supposed to do them. And like you said, I go through this all the time. I work from home. Just yesterday, I needed to record 5 new episodes for our podcast. And I kind of had that feeling of like, if I don't do it today, it's not the end of the world. And it was a struggle to kind of overcome that resistance to just get in front of the mic and hit record and do it. And I just remember thinking through that yesterday, like, wow, if I was on a phone call with somebody, or if I was sitting down to record this interview in person, I wouldn't have that resistance. I would show up with them, because I have this appointment. I'm going to respect this other person's time. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to show up, and I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. But when it's just us and we don't have that appointment with somebody else, it can become very easy to, shirk those things or let ourselves off the hook. So where I'm going with that is, I think one of the biggest ways to help yourself do those things is to block off time on your schedule or your calendar. Make it an appointment with yourself and just say, okay, on Tuesday at 10 o'clock, I'm filming these videos, or, I'm doing these things, and then put something on the back end of that, so that if it doesn't get done in that window, then, it doesn't get done. So it's a little bit of a way to kind of provide yourself that same sense of urgency.
Yep.
Little tricks to kind of, understand how our minds work.
For sure. That's one of the things I do. I tell people too, I say, put it on the calendar. When it comes up on the calendar, you don't think about it or ask yourself if you want to do it. You just do the thing that's on the calendar, right? You just do it. And it's one of, and I don't know what the name of this concept is, but it's once you get started doing something too, it's typically easier to keep going and doing it, right? Like the hardest part of going to the gym is waking up and putting your gym stuff on and actually driving to the gym, right? So did I lose you there?
Yeah, I think so.
That's right. All I was saying was the hardest part of, once you get started doing something, it's way easier to get it done, right? As opposed, going to the gym, the hardest part of for a lot of people of working out is actually just making it to the gym. Once you get there, the working out part is easy, but for a lot of people, they stop before they get there. So if it's on the calendar, just get started. You'll find that it's way easier to get done, you know? All right. So we jumped way ahead because I'm terrible. I'm a bad interviewer. But I want to know, like, like, tell me your story, like where you're from, and like start at the beginning. You know, like, who is Ryan Munsey, and how did he write a book? You know, like, where you're from, and tell us a little bit about you.
Well, we'll go all the way back to growing up as a kid. I was born in Roanoke, Virginia, so the southwest corner of the state of Virginia. Grew up in the mountains and very close to the Appalachian Trail, so outdoors, played all the sports. I went to Clemson, was not good enough to play sports at Clemson, but I was lucky enough that my best friend from high school was a year behind me, and he actually was a high jumper at Clemson. And I got to hang out with him and the track team while we were there. So, that was really my introduction to performance training. I learned sprint technique from coaches who were also teaching, Olympic sprinters and guys who would eventually play in the NFL how to sprint. And I became fascinated with the idea that, I can change the way I eat, and it will change the way my body feels. It will change the way I look. It will change the way I perform. Became obsessed with kind of.
Uh-oh. Come back.
Lost you again.
That's okay. That's all right.
So I'm not sure where that cut out, but
you just became. You're talking about how you became obsessed with performance, with all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So it was fascinating to me that if you manipulated certain inputs, how you train, how you eat, how you sleep, that all the other outputs change as well. How you look, how you perform, how you feel. And I changed my major to food science and human nutrition, and eventually graduated with a dietetics degree. If I did an internship after school, I would have been a registered dietitian, but I didn't agree with anything that we were being taught in those nutrition classes. And I knew this was, 2006 to 2008. I graduated in 2008. And even then I knew that I needed a platform. The thing that really frustrated me then was just this lack of knowledge that the average person had. They had no idea how to eat, had no idea what it meant to be healthy, and most of the information that was being thrown at them and at us was false. It's paid for by big food, and everything's run by big pharma, and all the things that you hear people raging against in the kind of alternative health movements. I don't want to call them alternative, but paleo, keto, all the things where people are kind of being proactive with their own health and taking it into their own hands, rather than kind of the way our parents were, where it was like, oh, if the doctor says so, or 60 Minutes says so, then this is what it must be.
Right.
And so I knew then that I needed some kind of a platform. When I graduated, I had the opportunity to move to New York and be a fitness model. And I saw that as, hey, that's a way to, people are going to listen to me, if I can be famous for whatever. And so I thought I was going to move to New York and get paid to work out and have my picture taken. Didn't really work out that way. It's not exactly what the modeling industry is. And when I realized what it was, I couldn't get out fast enough. But while I was there, I did start working as a personal trainer, moved back to Virginia, did the personal trainer thing at a big box gym for a few years before I decided I could do it better on my own, opened my own performance training facility and ran that until about end of 2015, 2016 is when I sold that. Started hosting podcasts, started working with a few startups in the consumer product space, biohacking and health spaces. So being a nutrition coach and a strength coach, writing for fitness magazines, and really kind of being hands-on for almost a decade with, the health side of those pursuits, nutrition and fitness. I just became obsessed, or not obsessed, curious as to why some people had success and other people didn't. I actually said this yesterday in one of the podcasts I recorded, that I can usually tell by the second interaction with somebody whether or not they're going to achieve their goals. And what I've started to do is I'll give people tasks or little tests or little action items in that first call. And I can usually tell by the second call, like I said, whether or not they're going to have success, because the people who are going to have success are going to get things done regardless. And between call one and call two, or point of contact one and point of contact two, if they've done these things that I've asked at the first point, then I kind of know, like, hey, this is going to be somebody who's going to do the work and get the stuff done. Like you said earlier, if there's somebody that has the excuses or didn't get done, or I got busy, then I'm kind of like, oh man, this one's going to take a lot. Because this person is kind of, they're letting themselves off the hook. And so that really became the genesis for diving into the mental side of this. And that's what led to writing the book. I've been able to work with Olympic athletes, professional athletes, special forces operators, normal moms and dads, grandmothers who have lost tremendous amount of weight, high school kids who got college scholarships to play sports. And it doesn't matter who you are or what the goal is. The space between your ears is the secret to all of it, whether it's business or nutrition or fitness, relationships. Can you, as we already kind of said earlier, can you show up and do what you're supposed to do, or what is required of you to get the result, regardless of how you feel? And, that's really what led to the writing of the book. And, you asked, how does Ryan, actually get to writing a book? And I mean, man, I'll be the first to tell you, I've always gravitated towards math and science. I'm very analytical. I thought by majoring in sciences in college that I wouldn't have to write.
Right.
I'm the guy who always tried to avoid writing, and now, I'm a communicator for a living, and I write, I speak, and I'm actually like in love with art and communication and that whole side of things now. So it's funny that that's kind of where I end up. But,
yeah.
I think I try to fly through the story. So
yeah, what's different about this book from a lot of other sort of like mindset books or performance books that I've read, at least I've read a bunch, is that there's a lot of science in here, right? Like a lot. And well, not in a bad way. Like it's just, it goes deep, right? It really does. It's good. I was just curious about how, like your background, I think provides some insight into why you went that direction. But I'm just curious about how you even, because my guess is, for example, even athletes, anybody that's into performance, they very rarely, I would imagine, get into the science behind the thing, right? They just want the technique. I'm asking not a great question, but I'm trying to figure out just basically what got you into the sciencey part of it, as opposed to just saying a strategy is to do XYZ. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. The short answer is I'm the dude that never stopped asking why.
Yeah.
From the very beginning of my pursuit into, all of this stuff, it was never good enough for me to just have somebody else's plan. I want to know, if I read something and the smartest guy, the strongest guy in the world says, okay, here's how you get strong. I don't just want the X's and O's. I don't want the program. I want to know why it works. I don't want to know why this is the best. I don't want to know what the best diet is. I want to know why it's the best diet. And so that's how my mind has always worked. And I think it serves me well now in these pursuits of being a coach, because for me, I've always wanted to understand those governing dynamics behind whatever it is, right? And so, if you're in real estate and you come to me and you say, okay, here's the can't fail plan to make a lot of money. I'm like, well, but I want to know how real estate works. I want to know all the stuff so that I can, make those decisions on my own. And that's really what it came down to, is And my coaching style is, I always use the analogy of, it's teaching a man to fish so he can feed himself for life.
Right.
That's, and when I do the workshops, I always have this slide where I ask people, are you a cook or are you a chef? And it's funny, I'll go into a room of like, a couple of weeks ago, we were in Denver at an Air Force base, and there's about 50 guys in there, 50 guys, men and women. And I said, raise your hand if you're a cook. And about 4 people raised their hand. And I said, okay, raise your hand if you're a chef. One guy raises his hand. I'm like, how do the rest of you get food in your mouth?
Yeah, right. That's awesome.
And I don't want to throw them under the bus, but they all basically said McDonald's and 7-Eleven. I'm like, well, this is going to be really easy to make you a higher performer.
Yeah, for sure.
But my point with this is it has nothing to do with the kitchen. It's about ownership of information.
Right.
And the difference between a cook and a chef, a cook has to have a recipe. They have to have this list that says, here's all the things, do all the things in this order, in this method, and you get the output. A chef can either have no recipe, or they can look at that recipe, use it as a jumping off point or inspiration, throw it out the window, and they understand, cook times and cook mechanisms and recipes and all this stuff. So again, it comes back to ownership of information. And I want personally to understand that so that, I can, there's nothing I can't figure out if I can understand the governing dynamics behind how something works.
Right.
And this is what I talk about all the time when I get to speak to so many different groups of people. I get to speak to athletes and entrepreneurs and business owners. I get to talk about leadership. I get to talk to people at self-defense seminars. And I often ask myself, like, how did I wind up in front of this group? A group of people who own law firms. Well, the bottom line is we're all humans. And I have an intimate understanding of the human operating system.
Right.
So again, I don't care what your pursuit is. You're a human. You're working on the same operating system. It's like if I understand computers, it doesn't matter what you're trying to do with your computer. I know how to get the computer to do the thing you're trying to get it to do. Right. I know how to get the mind and the body to do the thing that you're trying to get it to do. Right. And that's because of ownership of information, understanding the science behind it. And so that's one of the reasons that my mind went that way in presenting the information, so that people who read the book can have it as a user's manual. I didn't want it to be, hey, do this. Right. I wanted it to be, hey, this is what's going on. Right. Understand what's going on between your ears. Now you can make the best choice for you.
Yeah.
And the other side of that was, you mentioned all the resources is, I didn't want to just say something and put it in a book and be like, well, yeah, because I said so. Right. Or if I wanted to make a statement, like I wanted to make sure that anything I said was factual and rooted in science and research. And so that was actually what made writing the book very tedious. I had these things that, these concepts and these, I guess, universal things that I've seen throughout different people, anecdotes and things like that. But you can't just come out and say that. You've Right. got to be able to back it up. And so, that's the other side of why there's so much science.
Yeah, no, it's super resource driven. Right? And I'll tell you, one of the sort of trippy epiphanies that I had as I was going through this book was that, everything, what's crazy is that basically your thoughts, your feelings, all these sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of like ephemeral things that we have, these like woo-woo things, they're actually all chemical reactions inside of our brains, right? Like yeah. There's actually a biological chemical thing that is happening that is making you feel sad, for example, which is freaking, it's weird, right? But what that does too is if you can see that and understand that, I think it also helps to give you a little bit of additional control over your thoughts and the way that you approach things and being able to see things, because like you can say to yourself, like, this thing is I'm in charge basically of this thing, like, yeah. And in the book you talk, there's a lot of talk about how to change your state and how to like, make a bad day good, or start your day right, or do these things that will sort of set you up for success. But knowing that it is all chemical and biological, I think makes your, which is weird, because I was going to say is your own thought about your control, right? So it's like this ephemeral thought that you have.
It gets pretty meta.
Your body biologically, it helps to know these things, so that way when you have these thoughts, they're actually, you know, chemically controlled too. But it is kind of crazy to think about that, you know, that all these things are literally chemical reactions inside of your brain and in body just in general. And it's just a weird deal, right? I mean, I think a lot of people would never even know that is the case. You just think like you have these thoughts, and they just like they're here, you know, like your state is something you can't change. Like, I'm just a grumpy person or whatever, but right. Like,
and the scary thing is, like, the more we think that, the more we repeat that, the more it self-perpetuates. And so I mentioned this earlier, and you know, this is one of the central themes of the book, and everything that I talk about is how important it is for all of us to operate with greater awareness. And there's so many layers and levels to that, but wherever you are, it's starting there and here now, and just continuing to be able to observe and bring in awareness to and go into the layers and the layers and the layers of that, like you just said, of like, well, I'm thinking that, like, I feel this way, but I feel this way because I think that. And am I thinking that now? Or is this a story that I play on repeat and tell myself?
Yeah.
And, you know, then we start to dive into, you know, limiting beliefs and, you know, the movie that plays in our head all the time. And there's a lot to that. And to kind of back up, this exploration goes as far back as, it probably goes back further, but we know that the Greeks wrote about this. And the analogy that they used was the horse and the rider. And in the book, you know, and when you dive into the science to figure out what these really are, it's the limbic system versus the prefrontal cortex. The limbic system is the older, primitive portion of our brain. It is incapable of thinking beyond the now.
Yep.
It's not all bad, right? Nothing is inherently bad. It's just, does this serve me well? Does this serve us now, or how does this serve us? I mean, even asking does it serve us is sort of binary, right? So it's always, how does this serve us?
Yeah.
But what we need to understand about the limbic system is, in the Greeks analogy of the horse and the rider, the horse is the limbic system. It's the ego-driven teenager who can't think beyond the now and is emotionally driven.
Right.
The prefrontal cortex is the rider. It is the sage. It is the portion of our brain that is more evolved. It has the executive function. It's capable of thinking beyond the now. It's newer in terms of evolution. And, you know, we want to be a rider who is skilled at making the horse go where, when, and how we want it to go, rather than being a rider who's just along for the ride and wherever the horse decides to go. You know, like I said, 95% of our decisions are made based on how we feel. And that's a statistic found by one of the most famous cognitive neuroscientists in the world, Antonio Damasio. And, you know, whether you want to argue, I always tell people, don't get caught up in the exact number, right? It doesn't have to be 95%. Maybe it's only 90%. Maybe it's 85%. That's still the vast majority of our decisions, way more than we would like. As you said earlier, if we're one of those people who wants to be at the controls, right? If I want to be the rider telling my horse, telling my life where it's going to go, I can't afford for that horse to be making 85 to 95% of the decisions, right? Like, imagine getting on a horse or getting in your car and just saying, all right, well, I'm only going to make 5% of the decisions on where this car goes.
Right.
You would never expect to get safely where you were trying to get.
Yeah.
So in life, you know, this is huge insight into why and how so many people fall short of the goals that they've set for themselves.
100%. And
And
take
so
it, by the way,
I
and
always,
to take it even farther, to take your analogy even one step farther, because I think this is also huge, and this is something I talk to people all the time about, is there's the horse and the rider, and then there's also the path that you're on, right? You are in charge of selecting the path. You talk about like the highway and the dirt road in your book a little bit, and about sort of carving a new way to go down, right? Because a lot of times people will let not just your internal standards affect you, but these external things that are coming at you, and you'll start to use those as excuses for the reasons that you do things, and allow people to put pressure on you to do things that are sort of not your highest and best calling, right? I mean, it's sick. So it's like the wind's blowing from the right, so the horse wants to run over here, and you're like, oh, well, the wind's blowing, like might as well just can't do anything about it, you know, like you know what I'm saying? Because a big part of what I talk to people about, and what I think is just so important, is that, you know, like, you're really in charge of everything that goes on in your life. You know, like there's nothing that you can't do if you want to do it. And there will be a lot of external forces out there that are telling you, like, I'm sure when you were like, hey, I want to write a book and like go do this thing, and people are probably like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, go be a model, you know, like, you're pretty, go make some money or whatever. Like, I don't know, I get what you're saying exactly, but they're probably thinking like, what are you doing? Like, you got this thing over here, it's like all good, you know, but you're like, look, it's not what I want to do. Like, it's not my thing, you know? So like, again, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think that it's really important, as far as when this self-awareness comes in too, to be aware of these things that are coming at you externally, and to be able to deflect those things. Because very often, like, for example, in our industry, right, there's definitely an idea of a way that attorneys should act, the way that they should market themselves, the way that they should do their business, the way that they should just be as people. And I think it's stupid, and you know, like, and but it's hard to get over that, because there's that external pressure coming at you from all these different sides. It's almost like you're a rider on a horse, and you gotta have to wear the right uniform when you're on the horse, right? Or your horse has got to be like a black horse or a white horse or something. Like, there's all these things. So like I said, again, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm like, I don't want to forget this thing. And because I think they're all important though, right? All these things are all coming together, you know?
Yeah. And so this, I mean, it really ties into what we said a minute ago, that, you know, awareness is everything. Awareness affords us the opportunity to make better choices. And without awareness, we don't realize that we're in that, right? So the more we can bring in awareness to this, the awareness to, you know, how the wind is impacting us, the awareness to what the pressures are for the color of the horse, or the clothes that we wear, or how all these things affect us, the stories that we tell ourselves.
And better choices
all
too,
of that
where do you want to go, right? What direction are you going in? What like, you get to decide where you're riding towards, right? Like, that also is a big deal. Like, am I going to do this thing? Is it going to get me closer to where I want to go or not? You know, like that is often, oh, you're back anyway. All right, you're back. All right. But that's okay.
All right. We live in the middle of nowhere, and we don't have good internet. So I apologize.
No, you actually, what's funny is it's actually not that bad, because the outs, they come in and out pretty quick, you know, not to jinx it, but it's like a 5 seconds. So it's no big deal. But anyway, you know, picking where you're going, I think is important, is that also goes to self-awareness, and having the courage to say, like, for me, I do things kind of weird with my law firm and the way I approach life. And for you too, to be able to say, like, look, I'm really into this stuff. I just want to go after this and pursue it and talk about it and teach about it and help people come to this place. Like, to be able to do that, because in your own brain, like, your brain is telling you, like, don't do this. Like, what if you fail, or what, like, all these different things that come into your mind, you know? So,
and that's rooted in, you know, our biology, in, you know, for however long you think we've been on the planet, depending on your belief systems, we are wired to conform to societal norms for survival. To go outside the pale of what was normal meant that you might be ostracized, and if that happened, then you would have to survive on your own. And until 50 or 100 years ago, surviving on your own was very, very, very difficult, you know, compared to now, where we get to enjoy the trappings of modern civilization and societies. But so that's hardwired into our DNA. And you know, I was going to bring this up earlier, and I think one of the other points that kind of comes with awareness is to be able to maintain an objective view of ourselves, the witness perspective, right? In meditation and yogic mythology,
Mythology, practice. Yep.
yes, yeah, practice. There you go. Thank you. Verbal fluency needs a little bit of help today.
Hey, it's early. Well, it's all good.
But they call it the witness perspective, right? And the other way of thinking about this is like when you're in an airplane and you're looking down on where you live, it looks completely different than when you're in it, right? And when we can have that view of how we're moving through the world, it's another form of awareness. And, you know, I always tell people to get out of their own shoes, to remove that me, the ego and emotional component of it, and project your current situation on either the person that you look up to, the person that you emulate, or the version of you that you want to be.
Right.
And so, you know, like you said, we were talking earlier about like how difficult it is to kind of sit down and do the work sometimes. Well, like you read the book, so you know I'm a big Springsteen guy. But think about whoever your favorite musician is. Where do you want them? You want them in the studio writing and recording new music.
Right.
And so, you know, when we're in those days and we're like, you know, hey, I'm supposed to do this today. I don't feel like it. Well, you know, what if Picasso didn't paint because he didn't feel like it? What if Springsteen didn't write? Like some of their best work comes from channeling, you know, those feelings that they can't necessarily articulate or tap into, the exploration of, you know, what does it mean to be me or human or this thing that I'm trying to figure out? And, you know, that's why we relate to and gravitate towards certain pieces of art or you know, these things. And so whatever your thing is, not bringing it into the world is robbing the world of your gifts and your greatness. And you know, if we think about that for ourselves, we usually get a different response than if we think about, well, what if Picasso or Springsteen or Michael Jordan, whoever it is. So getting out of our own story and looking at it as somebody else, we're like, wow, what a shame it would be if that person didn't do the thing that they were here to do.
Right.
Well, by you playing small, by us playing small and avoiding that stuff, that's exactly what we're doing. And so that's just another kind of mental gymnastics tool that we can kind of use to see what we're doing. And then again, it's awareness. And with that awareness, we have the choice. Am I going to continue to do that? Or am I going to step into, you know, that version of me that I want to be?
For when you are working with people, so what I always try to get people to like what I see a lot, what happens with me, I think what happens with everybody is you face these decisions and you know what you should be doing, but you still don't do it. Right. Like you like even Springsteen, I'm sure has days where he doesn't write. And there's some people that just never do it. And I'm always trying to I try to get people to find some sort of what I always ask people is, what is this grand thing that you want what your life to look like? And actually come up with the thing that's what they really want. I think that's the hardest thing for people to do sometimes, is to really be honest with themselves about what they want. Because once people find that thing, then doing the things becomes so much easier, right? So for example, people tell me like, oh, I want to own $1 million law firm. I'm like, great, that's no problem. All you have to do is like XYZ. It's not rocket science, just business, right? We'll come back in 2 weeks later and I'll say, so how's it going? Oh, I didn't do anything, right? I didn't do anything. So what that tells me often is that their vision, where they want to go, is not in alignment with their true. Does that make sense? Because I feel like find out where you really, so for example, you writing this book, I'm sure it was sucked, right? I'm trying to write a book. It's freaking ridiculously hard and it's not fun. You have all these ideas that you want to get out, but like getting them organized and saying it in the right way is super tough, right? But you have this idea of getting this message out to the world, so it makes doing this work not as painful as it might be otherwise. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I know I
sort
know
of
I'm rambling, and I'm not getting this concept across well. People getting honest with where they actually want to go and what they want to do
right.
outside, and it goes
Right.
back to sort of these societal ideas and what you need. It's so hard.
Yeah.
I think in many ways that's the key. For example, even high performing athletes, right? Do you really want to have a gold medal? If you do, then show up here and work hard. But if you
Yeah.
don't, that's okay. But just be honest with yourself about what you want, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And I think that's another way of asking that question is to ask yourself, can I live without doing this? Or can I live with myself if I didn't do this? And for some people, these pursuits are things that, keep us up at night, or we wake up early in the morning thinking about it. Like you said, writing the book for me was the hardest thing I've ever done. It was miserable, but it was one of those things that it was inside of me and it had to come out. I never said, like, writing a book was never a goal on my 5-year plan or my bucket list. Like I didn't ever set out and say, like, I want to write a book. It just, through the work and the things that I'm passionate about, I was able to kind of come across and synthesize some information and some ideas that really just needed to be communicated and put out there. And, I had to get to a place where I could channel that and put it out there. And that was very difficult. Had I not done that, it would still continue to eat at me.
Right.
And I think, that's kind of what we're talking about here is, are you doing the thing because you think you have to, because of like external or extrinsic factors? And so one of the things that I always talk about are toxic goals. And a lot of times, I'd say most goals that people set are rooted in one of the 3 C's of toxic goals: competing with, comparing to, or copying other people.
Yeah.
And so I challenge people to dive into their goals, the things that we think we want. Do you want them because you're trying to compete with, copy, or compare yourself to, the other law firm, or, whoever you saw on social media, the I saw trap? Most goals are, I saw somebody else doing or having this thing, so I think I want it. And then you go down that path and you're like, oh, well, I don't really want this. I don't want to do what it takes. Like, I always use The Rock as an analogy here. People want his lifestyle, but very few people are willing to do the things that he does on a daily basis to make it happen.
100%.
And are we back?
You're back. I can't see your face, but I can hear you.
We're back. Okay. And yeah. And so if that's not what you want, that's okay.
Right. 100%.
I think what we're both saying is it's actually better that you realize and are aware that that's not what you want, so that you can get on your authentic path. I promise you, when you get on that authentic path, it won't feel forced.
Right.
You won't be able to stop thinking about the thing. You'll actually have to find ways to slow down and find balance.
No doubt. I'll give you
to finish that thought.
Oh yeah, go. Sorry, keep going.
Well, just to finish the thought, you mentioned Springsteen a minute ago, and I think at the beginning of this talk, I mentioned different phases of business, right? And if you look at Springsteen today, dude's 70 years old. He could never write another song, and his body of work is not going to suffer by him not writing another song. He's already done what he's here to do, right? He's made his impact. Somebody like The Rock is actually kind of in that sustainable, they're out of their survival mode in their journey. So it's fascinating for me to watch him. And if you look at his work ethic on a day-to-day basis right now, he's somebody that, to our points in the beginning of the conversation, he could not bring that work ethic right now. And he'd probably level off and plateau for a little while, and then he would kind of just fade away, Yeah. But if he wants to be as big as he is now, 20 and 30 years down the road, like say a Springsteen at 70, then he's going to have to continue to do those things on a daily basis that got him there and will keep him there. And it's interesting to watch people at those different points of their journey and see how those things play out. And so, those are 2 people who are doing what they love, what they're passionate about, and what they're here to do. And I think it's just for some of us, it's harder to find that for various reasons than others, but it is there for all of us.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, the only thing I was going to say is like, look, we started this interview at 7:00 in the morning here, and I was excited. Most people are like, what the fuck are you doing? It's 7:00 in the morning. Why are you, like doing this stuff? I'm like, look, this is not, it's not hard for me. Like, this is not drudgery for me. This is not, we are kind of working, but it's what I like. It's what I'm into, so it's fun. And so, that's right. So, it just goes back to that. It just goes back to that idea of when you're chasing what you really love, it's work and it's hard, but it's different, because it feels good almost, to work hard. All right. So we got to go pretty soon. There's one thing I wanted to talk to you about, because I think it applies both in some ways to your book, but it also just applies to business in general. And, a lot of times attorneys are trying to talk to people about things that they don't even know exist, that problems that they are not aware of, that they need to be aware of, or things they need to think about that they should be aware of. And I think in some ways your journey is similar, right? Because there's so many people that just don't even understand the power that they have over their own lives and performance, right? So what are some of the ways that you have found to be able to get your message out, to get people to even sort of understand that this thing exists? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of allowing people to experience what I'm talking about. When I speak, actually, before we recorded this podcast today, I'm working on a presentation that I'll do in 2 weeks. Actually, 2 weeks from today, I'll be at the Fairfax Police Department, and we're talking about high performance. And this will be a demographic that performance is not only their profession, but it's their livelihood. And many people don't have the knowledge or training, the education about what it is that we're talking about.
Right.
This user's manual for the human physiology and psychology. And I always start with what I call proof of concept. And I could get up there and talk about it and tell you about it, but it will click so much faster and it will stay with you so much longer if you experience it. And so we always do, when I speak or when I talk, I build in interactive things where people can experience it. So things like movement or music. If I can do cold exposure, I have people, either get in ice water or take cold showers. We'll do breathing exercises. The movement and music will be kind of used to stimulate and heighten or activate the nervous system. And then we'll follow that with some breath work where we can bring it back down and down regulate. And that will be super crucial for like military or law enforcement, where these guys are always on, they're always redlining, they're always going, they're always in sympathetic. So how do we down regulate and get into parasympathetic? And so those proof of concepts to where you're showing people how quickly and how powerfully you can control your autonomic nervous system and actually dictate what's happening between your ears, because neuroscience defines feelings as mental experiences of physiological states. So what's happening from the ears down is determining, what's happening between the ears. So very quickly, I can show people how you can control this and how that changes, what's going on between your ears. And then, by experiencing that, then people are open and receptive to all the science, and they're like, wow, that was really cool.
Yeah.
How did that work? Why did that work? Tell me more about how I can use these tools and do all this stuff. So
yeah, that's awesome. Ryan Munsey, author of Fuck Your Feelings, Master Your Mind, Accomplish Any Goal, and Become a More Significant Human. Thanks. I really appreciate you coming on, and again, for rescheduling and everything. I know you got to go, you got to heart out. What, maybe like just closing thoughts, where people can find you. I know you mentioned a podcast, and whatever you got, man, the floor is yours. I really appreciate it.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for having me on. Always enjoy the opportunity to talk about my work and what I'm passionate about. And if people want to hear more about that, the website is kind of the base for all the operations, ryanmunsey.com.
Yeah.
Of course, the book, Fuck Your Feelings, we turned that into an online course, Master Your Mind. And then there's the Better Human Workshop, which is kind of an 8-hour day where we dive deeper into all that stuff. And you can find all that stuff on my website.
Cool. Cool. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And, fuck your feelings, right?
That's right. Do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it, regardless of how you feel.
That's right, man. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Chris.
Yep.